In this video, I want to experiment with different kinds of pesto. I've made pesto plenty of times. Normally I make a traditional pesto, which is basil, Parmesan. I actually use Romano, pine nuts, olive oil, and garlic. On my website right there, there is a recipe for pesto lamb. That's where I use a traditional pesto, but I want to make 4 different kinds of pesto today. One of which I've also made before, that is with sun-dried black olives in the pesto. It makes it very dark, almost a black pesto. It's really, really delicious on lamb. And then the other 2 I want to try working with is a pesto made with a lot of mint in it, and then a very herbal pesto. I want to put cilantro and Italian parsley in it to add more herbs to it. I have 2 legs of lamb in the refrigerator. I'm out of lamb in my freezer for my lazy man meal. So what I want to do is cut each of those legs in half. So I have 4 pieces of lamb, and just like I would do my pesto lamb, like it's on the website, I'm going to prep each of those pieces with the pesto, put it in the refrigerator overnight, and then roast it tomorrow. So let me get into the various ingredients that I'm going to be using for making my different kinds of pesto today. I have a pile of herbs here. This is a 1-pound bag of basil that I bought. Fortunately, in this town we have a good bulk produce store. And then this is my Italian parsley. This is my mint. This is a bunch of fresh cilantro. Obviously my garlic. As I mentioned, I'm using Romano cheese rather than Parmesan cheese. Pine nuts, for some odd reason this year, are prohibitively expensive in the warehouse store. I have some here. I'm going to be using these, but I'm also going to substitute, because I've done this before and I really like the difference. I'm going to be using almonds. I'm going to roast these in the oven for about 10 minutes at 350 degrees. These I'm going to toast in a skillet on the top of the stove just until they start to change color and I can smell the aroma coming out of them. That's a good indication that they're toasted enough. And then this, of course, is my extra virgin olive oil. So those are the various ingredients I'm going to be experimenting with today. After I removed all the stems and took out the leaves that looked pretty bad, I ended up with about 9.5 ounces of basil leaves. This is about 1/4 of that. The rest is all over there. I'm dividing it up between 4 different portions. And then I have about 1 cup of cheese. I have my pine nuts. If you can see the color change there, these have now been toasted in a skillet. At about medium-high heat, it only took about 2 minutes to get those nicely toasted, and then I got them out of the pan right away because the pan is going to continue to stay hot, so I don't want the pan to scorch them. And this is only 1/2 cup of extra virgin olive oil. Normally when you make pesto, you want to put a lot more olive oil because you want it to be runny and drizzly. You want it to drizzle down through the pasta if you're putting pesto on pasta. I want this to stick to my lamb, so I'm not going to use as much olive oil. Then I have 6 cloves of garlic here. These implements here are because when you're working with basil, making pesto, you can't just drop the leaves in a food processor with all your ingredients and just chop it all up. You'll end up with basically chopped basil. To really get a nicely flavored pesto, you want to crush the leaves and get the juice out of the leaves. For a long time, I used a mortar and pestle until my carpal tunnel syndrome flared up. Then I started using, this is a tenderizing mallet. You don't want to use the part with the points on it, obviously. You'll tear up your bag. This has a smooth side. I found that the best way to beat on them is with a rubber mallet. And what I do is I put all the ingredients, well, at least the pine nuts, the leaves, and the garlic. I put it in a Ziploc bag, seal it, and then just break it all down. It takes a while, but once it's all broken down, then I can put those ingredients into a food processor to finish the blending with the oil and the cheese. Okay, so there's my leaves in there, my pine nuts and my garlic. I'm going to press some of this air out. And this is going to take me a while, but I'm just going to work it with a hammer. So that only took a few minutes. There it is, all crushed up. Obviously that's not a pesto yet, but at least my leaves are all broken up, they're all crushed. So my next step is to get all of this with the oil and the cheese into my food processor. All right, I have my leaves and everything in my blender. Gonna add my cheese and my oil. I'm gonna need this. Oh, this is what I do to cheat. One less thing to wash if I put a barrier in there. It's a guy thing. All right, and then start mixing this up. And let me see what that looks like. Very little oil on the bottom. Just gonna mix this up a little bit, scrape the sides down. Give that one more quick blend. See, by putting this in, this plastic, I don't have to wash the top because nothing gets in there. I'm happy with that. Slide that out of the way. And there's my pesto. Nice and smooth. This is a classic pesto, just those 5 ingredients: the garlic, the cheese, the pine nuts, the olive oil, and of course, the fresh basil. I'm going to be doing the same process over again for the 3 other kinds of pesto that I'm going to make. So there's no point in showing you the same thing again and again and again, but I am going to go over the ingredients that I'm going to put into each one. It's a lot easier to break up almonds, grind them up in a food processor if they've been roasted in the oven. For some reason, these hold together too well when they're fresh like this. So I'm going to be putting these in a 350 degree oven for about 10 minutes, and that should roast them well enough, let them cool down, and then I can use them for making my pestos. I have here some sun-dried olives in oil that have pits in them. So I have to break these out to get the pits out, like so. I'm going to be doing about 30 of these, and then that's going to be ground up into the pesto. This is what will give the pesto a really dark color. For my black olive pesto, again, I have about 2 1/3 ounces of basil leaves. These are my 30 black olives. These are the sun-dried olives. I removed the pits. Again, 1/2 cup of olive oil, 6-7 cloves of garlic. This is 1 cup of almonds, whole almonds that have been toasted for 10 minutes at 350 degrees in the oven, and 1 cup of Parmesan. This is Romano cheese. So again, this is all going to go into a plastic bag again, get hammered down to get all broken up, and then we'll go in the food processor and you'll see what it looks like when it's done. Okay, the ingredients for pesto number 3. Again, about 2 1/3 ounces of basil leaves. I have here about 1/2 ounce of mint leaves. I weighed my almonds rather than just doing it by 1/2 cup or whatever it is. These are 4 ounces by weight of almonds. That's 1/2 cup of olive oil. These are smaller cloves of garlic, so I have about 8 or 9 cloves of garlic in there. And again, my 1 cup of Romano cheese. So once again, these will all go into a Ziploc bag, get hammered down, and then be mixed up in our food processor. For my last pesto that I want to experiment with, this is an herbal pesto. So I have my 2 and about 1/3 ounces of fresh basil leaves, again about 1 cup of Romano cheese, 4 ounces of whole almonds, 1/2 cup of olive oil, my garlic. I have a rosemary bush in my backyard, so I took about I don't know, maybe that's a tablespoon or two of rosemary sprigs. I like rosemary with lamb, so I decided to add that to this pesto. And then this is about 1/2 ounce of flat leaf parsley, or otherwise known as Italian parsley, and then 1/2 ounce of cilantro. So again, I'm going to take my herbs and my garlic and my nuts and put them in a Ziploc bag, hammer them down, and then that'll be ready to go into the food processor for the final blending. So there they are, my 4 different kinds of pesto: traditional, black olive, mint, and herb. I'm going to set these aside, and then I'll start working with my lamb. From this point forward, I'm going to be following the steps that I do in my pesto lamb recipe. I'm going to pull this elastic casing off that ties it together. I'm going to trim all the fat off because I want the pesto to flavor the meat, not the fat. And then, as I mentioned, I'm going to cut these in half somewhere and make 4 roasts out of it. And each one of these roasts is going to have the different pesto coating on it. So there's no point in going over this whole process. This is in the pesto lamb recipe, this next step. Okay, I've trimmed this half of the leg. I've got 2 pieces here. This is the other piece. I divided this leg in half. I'm going to start spreading my pesto. This is the traditional pesto here. Again, this is in the pesto lamb recipe, and this is more pesto than I really need. All right, let me rinse my hands, and then I'm going to tie this up. I've been wanting to try this. One of the fans of the site recommended that I do a surgeon's knot. Never thought to do that. So you go around and around and around, and it makes like a locking knot, and you shouldn't have to hold it. Oh, it holds decent. And then one more on top just to lock it in place. It actually works pretty well. I'm going to tie that this way. So these just goes through several times. Yeah, that holds pretty well. I like that. And then you just do one simple knot over the top to lock it. So much easier. And then I guess that'll be okay. So, one more step. And then just start spreading this around the outside. You'll notice this pesto, again, as I mentioned, it doesn't have a lot of oil in it. So it doesn't drool down a lot. I like a fairly dry, fairly stiff pesto so that it'll stay in place as I work with it. Get the last of that. Again, I want to rinse my hands, and then I'm going to just bring this plastic up and wrap this up. Okay. Let's see if I can do this without too much difficulty. That's nice. All right, so that's wrapped up pretty well. And then let me get my labels out, and I'm going to label this one so I know which one it is. Okay, there's my label. So now this is ready to go in the refrigerator. This will sit overnight. I have that other half to go, and then I'm going to prep the other leg. So I'll have 4 different legs of lamb here sitting in the refrigerator overnight, and then tomorrow I will roast them. There they are, 4 half legs of lamb. These will sit in the refrigerator overnight to let that pesto flavor the meat. And then tomorrow they will be roasted. I'm going to roast them to about 135, 140 degrees inside. That should bring them up to about medium well. There they are, my 4 roast lambs. I know this dark one here is, of course, the black olive one. So that would mean this one here, because I kind of drew a map to where things were. This one is going to be the mint. This one is the traditional one, and this is the herb pesto. The traditional pesto, I've tasted this many times, and I've tasted the black olive pesto before, so I know what these two are going to taste like, but I'm curious to see what the mint and the herb pesto lamb is going to taste like, so that is my next step. Oh, and I cooked these to about 125 degrees. There goes a plane overhead. I timed this take just right. I cooked these to about 125 degrees and then took them out of the oven, let them sit for about 20 minutes. They came up to actually over 140. So let me see what these two are going to taste like. Okay, the first piece of meat I want to taste is the mint. Got a bit of the string still in there. See how this tastes. See, I can taste the mint. It's not a strong, overpowering flavor of mint, but there's just a hint of mint in there. Okay, that's very good. My other piece here, this is the herbal pesto. Curious to see how this will taste. An interesting flavor because nothing jumps forward. You can taste the herbs in there, but it doesn't taste like, wow, that's rosemary, or wow, that's cilantro. All the flavors are really nicely balanced in there. But it does have a very herby flavor to it. So, there you have it. 4 different kinds of pesto. I did a very dry, thick, kind of pasty pesto because I wanted to coat lamb with it. I didn't want it to run off. If you want to make pesto for like putting over pasta, double or even triple the amount of olive oil so that it can drizzle down through the pasta and give you a nice oily or more olive oil flavor. I think that would be delicious on pasta. Any of these would be good on pasta. Well, maybe not the mint, because I think of mint as being a flavor that specifically goes with lamb. But these other 3, the black olive, the traditional, and the herbal pesto, I think those 3 would be good in a lot of different dishes that call for pesto. So experiment with pesto. Now that you know how to make it, use your imagination, enjoy creativity. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit my website, mobilehomegourmet.com, and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.